3 years ago.
Hey, Lieutenant. Tahir's at the gate to see you. Says it's important.
I look up from my desk to my platoon sergeant. That's what he said last time when he wanted fuel for his truck. And before that, he wanted plywood for his checkpoint, so he ended up selling for profit. It's always important with that asshole. Take Lucas down there and get the details.
Nah, I don't need the terp. Get this. Tahir's speaking English, but he says he'll only talk to you.
This was a new development. My platoon and I had been in Iraq for just over 6 months, manning a tiny outpost on our own. The slice of hell we were responsible for was a small shitheel of a town called Al-Siniyah, up Route Tampa north of Tikrit. Officially, Tahir al-Qasim was the leader of the town Sawat, basically a neighborhood watch with guns. Unofficially, he ran the place. Before the war, he worked as an intelligence officer in Saddam's army. He was smart, cunning, and extremely dangerous. He was also a necessary evil, keeping order in his kingdom through guile when possible, and force when required. I'd suspected for months that he understood English better than he would admit, but this was the first outward proof of it. For him to wantonly play a card that big, maybe this time what he needed was actually important. Well, Sergeant Troy, I guess you better bring him in then. I hardly recognized the man escorted into my office. The brash, confident thug I'd grown used to dealing with is gone. In its place, a furtive wreck. Tahir takes a seat across from me and accepts the soda Troy offers him. I notice there are deep circles under his eyes, like he hasn't slept in days. His hands are shaking visibly, and he has trouble working the tap on the can. Tahir is terrified. I can't begin to say how much that scares me.
Thank you for agreeing to see me, Mulasim Michael. You will of course be realizing that I only come to you this way out of grave necessity.
His accent is noticeable, but doesn't impede his speech in the least. The man's fluent. Well, past experiences aside, it does strike me as pretty odd that you'd suddenly reveal you spoke English to Tahir. Especially after all those awkward conversations we had through Lucas about how you didn't speak English. So I figured there was at least a chance it might be worth my interest. Let me guess, your boys need plywood at the checkouts.
Would that it was. Suppose I deserve that. I admit I have certainly taken advantage of certain situational realities in the past.
His eyes grow hard.
But I would ask you not to make jokes at the expense of the dead.
I sit straight up. Are you telling me?
All of them. Save myself and 3 others. 2 nights ago.
Tahir, you had more than 50 men. What the hell happened? The broken man continues to face me, but the gaze is far away.
Why, just that, Mulasim Michael. Hell happened.
It's 4 hours after my conversation with Tahir, and I'm riding shotgun in my mine-resistant vehicle. There are 3 more of my trucks in the convoy following the Sawat leader in his beaten-up pickup. All told, I only have 20 of my men with the other 10 needed on guard at the outpost. I didn't want to lie to my commander, but I didn't want to get committed either. Telling him I needed reinforcements to go monster hunting just wasn't going to fly. I can only hope this will be enough. Some of the townspeople had come to Tahir earlier in the week. Kids had started going missing. The only signs were strange marks leading off into the desert, like something huge and heavy was dragging itself across the dunes. They pleaded with him to send his man after the kids, and he complied. Maybe he wasn't quite the bastard I thought he was. Tahir managed to follow the marks to a natural cave dug into the side of a hill out in the wastes, several miles from even rudimentary civilization. I'm still unsure exactly what to believe of the rest of Tahir's story. I've known the man long enough to be sure that something happened, but God, I hope he's lying to me. Or crazy. Bandits or Vithis factions are one thing. Living nightmares that slaughter and eat your own men in front of you? That's something else. It's twilight. The moon just started to peek up over the horizon. Unfortunately, there's some nasty weather heading in. Not uncommon as winter's the only time it rains here. and the clouds are going to block any illumination. Damn, but I wish we could have done this during the daylight. My gut tells me this could go sideways really fast. If I knew exactly what we were going after, a terrorist cell, say, doctrine supports a night strike since our tech is better than theirs. But going in on half-blind intelligence, and with the insane stories to hear spouting, I'm not too keen facing monsters in the dark. My conscience won't let it wait, though. If kids are missing, and I'm sure Tahir's telling the truth about that, then it has to be now. I briefed my men exactly what Tahir told me. It took me a little while to decide whether or not I was going to, but ultimately, I'd rather they have an idea of what they might be up against. Worst case scenario, I end up looking like a jackass. Best case, maybe it eliminates hesitation and saves lives. I can only hope we're so lucky. For anyone who's only ever lived in a city, it's almost impossible to appreciate how absolutely empty and dark the desert can be. Night is truly fallen now, and with the clouds totally blanketing the sky, only Tahir's headlights ahead offer a faint reminder of day. I've ordered my men to drive blacked out. Convoys at night are prey for even merely human monsters. We left the road behind 30 minutes ago. Bouncing along, the dunes rise up either side of us, too high for anyone but the gunner to see over. It's like traveling down a narrow hallway walled with sand. It's anyone's guess what's at the other end. I glance over at Robinson, my driver. His face is set, eyes straight ahead, hands tightly gripping the wheel. The banter that would normally accompany one of our missions is nowhere to be found. Abruptly, the way opens into a large clear area, about 50 yards across and ringed by dunes. Ahead, the far end of the clearing is capped by a large hillock about 30 feet high. Tahir's headlights are fixed on a yawning hole at its base that seems to bore into the mound. He stops the pickup. I call over the radio. "All right, boys. I guess this is the place. Establish a perimeter with the trucks around this clearing, then dismount. Drivers and gunners stay with the vehicle. Everyone else, meet me in the center." Checking to make sure my rifle is loaded and my grenades are accessible in their pouches, I shove open the heavy door of my vehicle and step down onto the ground. Since we were driving without lights, I'm already wearing my night vision goggles, and the entire world shows up on my monocolor sight as alternating shades of black and green. I move to the middle of the perimeter and wait for my men to join me. Sergeant Troy is the first one there.
"Sir,"
he says,
"I'm again going to reiterate that you should not be going on this mission. We don't know what's down there, and you're too important to risk."
"I appreciate the concern, Sergeant, but you know my philosophy is lead from the front. I can't very well ask you to go down the scary dark monster hole if I'm not willing to. And besides," I grimace, "leaving 2 men per truck out here means we only have 12 trigger pullers, including me. Whatever's down there killed about 50 of Tahir's guys. You're gonna need all the help you can get." He grabs my vest and pulls me in closer.
"Damn it, sir, then just swap out one of the drivers."
"No, Troy. I'm going, and that's it. Now let go and shut up before the rest of the men get here."
"Fine, but I've got 2 conditions, sir. Number 1, lead from the front or not, you let second squad go first."
"Fair enough. What's number 2?
"Shit starts to go south there. We're pulling your ass out of the fire."
"Sergeant, if things go south, I don't think you'll have the chance." Letting go, my platoon sergeant reluctantly backs off. The men have begun to trickle in, so he makes himself busy doing final checks of weapons and gear. I appreciate his concern, but there's no way I'm sending my men into a situation on their own. If something happens, I need to know about it. The strike team is fully assembled. A light rain has begun to fall as I turn to Tahir standing next to me. "You see the hole there, Mosalim Michael? It is the mouth of hell itself. I wish you the very best of luck, my friend, and for your safe return. Assalamu alaikum." As he turns to go, I grab his arm. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear. I think you got the wrong idea about what's happening here. You're coming with us." If it weren't impossible, I'd swear I could see him blanch through my goggles.
But surely you jest. For it is very dark in the cave, and the last thing I would want to do is to draw attention to your party with my light.
He smiles nervously.
And I do not have access to the wonderful equipment you do.
Well, looky here. I hold up a pair of goggles. I seem to have found a spare set. Tahir flies into a rage, arms wide, spit spraying from his mouth.
No! I will not go down there again! You cannot make me, you damned American!
He tapers off when he feels the barrel of Sergeant Troy's rifle at the small of his back.
Please,
he pleads.
Please, my friend, do not make me throw my life away.
I lean in close, talking low into the big man's ear. Now you listen to me, Tahir. If what you're telling me is really down there, then I'm an even bigger bastard than you for making you go down there again. But here's the thing. What you're telling me is fucking crazy. For all I know, you sold your ass out, and I'm walking my men into a real nice ambush. So I'll give you a choice. You can either go with us, where I can promise you'll at least have a chance of surviving, or you can die out here right now. I step back, holding the goggles towards him. What's it gonna be? A look of pure despair crosses the man's face. Shoulders slumped. He takes the goggles from my outstretched hand, completely defeated. Putting them on, he turns away and begins walking towards the looming hall.
You're wrong, Muslim Michael.
He calls back to me.
I'm a dead man either way.
The rain's picked up steadily. Thunder rolls ominously in the distance.
God help me, but I hope you're wrong.
All right, boys, let's go. Make sure you have a positive ID on any targets. Remember, there might be kids in there. Second squad, lead out. With that, my man and I slowly move forward, their sinister entryway beckoning us onward to face horrors I can only imagine. The hole yawns wide and deep, its top reaching almost halfway up the mound. Sergeant Brown and the 4 men comprising second squad cautiously move forward in formation. Still lurking, Tahir joins me in a little ways behind them, while Sergeant Troy and the first squad bring up the rear. The rain has continued to fall, and, uncharacteristically, shows no signs of stopping. If it keeps up like this, we might have issues getting the trucks out of the sand and back onto the road. Well, on the bright side, I'll only have to worry about washouts if I get out of this cave alive. About 10 feet from the entrance is when a familiar, unmistakable odor hits me. The cave smells of death. Walking through the entryway, the stagnant air intensifies the stench, wielding it like a weapon. Ahead, I hear someone in the second squad retch. The hole itself is actually more like a semicircular tunnel, about 15 feet high and 10 feet wide. Pushing forward, the first thing I notice, other than the sickening smell, is that the walls are smooth and unnatural. For about 25 feet, the entire expanse from the floor to ceiling is covered with strange cave art, fantastic symbols that bear passing resemblance to ancient Syrian writings I came across during my studies in college. One small section of tunnel roof appears to have collapsed, disrupting the otherwise unbroken pattern of art. Whatever ink was used to transcribe the symbols glows with a faint luminescent, giving the passage a disconcertingly eerie feeling. The tunnel seems to be sloping gradually downward. Rather than simply leading into the hill, the hole burrows into the ground itself. How deep I can only guess. I see movement ahead as Specialist Barnes from secondary squad jogs up to me. The kid looks scared.
Sir, Sergeant Brown says you need to come take a look at what we got up here.
Okay, what is it?
He says not to tell you. Said it's something you gotta see for yourself.
Why the hell didn't he call me on the radio?
Tried, sir. Radio's out.
I key my hand mic, futilely trying to reach the trucks 50 yards behind me. Damn it. Must be something in these walls screwing with the signal. Barnes, keep going back to Sergeant Troy, and tell him to send a couple of guys to the trucks to let him know he won't be able to talk to us whilst we're down here. Then meet up with Sergeant Brown. Come on, Tahir. Let's go see what the fuss is all about. The Sawa leader sighs reluctantly.
I think you have a very good idea what it is, Molasim, Michael, as I've already told you.
We continue forward another 50 yards before I reach second squad and discover the source of the smell. Dozens of bodies covered the floor of the cave, torsos ripped open and limbs strewn across the mess of gore. The blood is dried, but based on the smell, the remains haven't been here long. All of the corpses exhibit wounds that would appear to have been caused by something incredibly sharp. Holding my breath against the stench, I lean down to take a closer look at one of the corpses. The body's headless and missing its right arm at the shoulder, where it's been messily torn off. The shredded remains of the clothing left on the body suggests it's local. Its stomach has been ripped open, and huge chunks of the gut seem to be missing, almost as if something's been eating it. A sharp thrill of fear shoots down my spine as I step back from the thing that used to be a human body. Tahir, you son of a bitch. I'm starting to think you might have told the truth. I look around until I find Sergeant Brown, who beckons me to where he stands just a little farther down the tunnel. As I approach him, there is a look of silent rage etched across his face, one arm outstretched and pointing to a pile of human bones completely picked clean of flesh and tissue. They're so very, very small. I feel my heart break. Led by Specialist Barnes, Sergeant Troy comes hustling up from the rear. He takes in the scene before turning to me and holding out a remote clacker.
Barnes filled me in. I took the liberty of prepping the tunnel entrance with C4 before coming down here. I highly recommend we go draw back to the trucks and seal whatever the fuck is in here to rot.
I numbly take the trigger from him. There might be more kids down there, Sergeant.
Sir, you know there's not.
I think for a long moment. The gibbering caveman part of my brain tells me there's nothing more it wants to do than leave this hole far behind and escape back to the relative safety of the patrol base. But the rational part, the one I've spent years training to perform under incredibly stressful situations, disagrees. What Sergeant Troy says is probably true. The odds of there being any living kids down here is almost absolute zero. But on the other hand, there's no telling where this tunnel goes, or if there are other exits the creatures could use to escape if we destroy the entrance we came through. If that's the case, there'd be nothing stopping it from killing again. Nothing to stop it from feeding. There's only one way to make sure that those bones will be the last. Sorry, Troy. We'll seal the entrance as a last resort. But we have to make sure we stop this son of a bitch for good. And by my estimation, the best way to do that is to shoot the fucker until there's too many different pieces to be a threat. We keep going. I pause and turn to the Sevall leader. Tahir, I'm sorry for doubting you earlier, but it looks like you were being honest with me. It doesn't seem right to drag a civilian any further into this mess. You're free to leave. I can't spare an escort, but you're welcome to keep the goggles on your way out if you promise to pass them to my driver once you reach the trucks. The big man grips my shoulder, a grave look upon his face.
You're a good man, Molasim Michael. And I think, in different circumstances, perhaps a good friend. I shall wait for you at the entrance. I will pray that if ever Allah watches over the infidel, that he do it this night.
Moving rapidly, he disappears towards the entryway. Looking after Tahir, Sergeant Brown hucks up phlegm and spits to the side. What a pussy. The casual bravado makes me smile. Agreed, but I'll do my best not to judge him too harshly until we find the thing that did this. Your squad okay with being on point? Sir? Brown's voice was as cold as ice. It'll be my absolute pleasure. I've got a feeling this tunnel's going to start to honeycomb. Use your gut to pick a route, and follow the stench. The radios are worthless down here, so don't get farther ahead than shouting distance. Tell the boys to stay sharp. Weapons free. If it moves, shoot it until it stops. No worries there, sir. Let's go, second. He turns and the squad begins making its way deeper down the hall. Troy is left standing beside me,
I'll keep the rear. But remember what we agreed to, sir.
I remember, Sergeant. Keep them alert. I'll mark the way back to the entrance with the hour chem lights. If this hole starts to branch off, I don't want to get lost down here, and I really don't want this thing sneaking up behind us. I follow close behind Second Squad, just as I suspected. The tunnel soon breaks off into multiple forks, sometimes as many as 3 or 4 different paths at any intersection. The darkness is now absolute. The strange glowing markings near the entrance of the cave a distant memory. I reach up and key the IR float on the side of my goggles, watching the expanse of the tunnel in a beam of invisible light to help my goggles be more effective. As we move ever deeper into the abyss, I become sharply aware of the crushing weight of the earth around me. I'm not claustrophobic, but down here I might as well be. We travel for what seems like hours, but checking my watch, it's only been about 15 minutes. Brown seems to be picking her out at random. Right, left, second from the left. I try to keep track, but I know after about 7 or 8 turns, it would be impossible to remember them all. Doing some quick mental calculations, I realize if this goes on much longer, we'll have to stop and cross-load chem lights back with first to mark our route, or they'll be running out. I curse inwardly. It would have made way more sense to have the lead element mark the path. But I hadn't been thinking about that at the time. Now I'll have to hope that Troy keeps close, or we'll risk losing him and the rest of the first squad at the first intersection. I pick up the trace and try and halt Sergeant Brown in order to consolidate and reorganize, when the latest tunnel abruptly opens into a large subterranean cavern. I have no idea how the geometry of this tunnel system works, because while it hasn't seemed like we've been going that far down, the height of the stalactite-peppered ceiling, almost lost in the darkness above my head, suggests we must have descended at least 100 feet. Brown and the second squad have stopped up ahead at the foot of a wide pool that dominates the cavern. Reaches as far as I can see in either direction. Despite the size of the cavern, the air is closed and thick, smelling of rot. I look behind me and confirm my fear. Troy and the first are nowhere to be seen.
Think this is as far as we go down this way, sir. Unless you brought a canoe with you.
Knew I forgot something, Sergeant Brown. I'll have to go back anyhow. Looks like we lost first somewhere along the way.
Are you kidding me? How the ever living fuck did they...
Sergeant!
Barnes is shouting.
There's something in the water!
Brown and I turn simultaneously in time to see a small wave ripple across the pool as something huge moves below the surface. There's a brief pause where all the time and motion seem to stop before the water explodes. An inhuman roar echoes throughout the cavern.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing. And if you're an animal lover like me, please consider donating to the World Land Trust, a charity that aims to help wildlife through buying land, preventing development, and helping endangered species.